Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the VUU, or the VUU, as QuianaDenae Perkins likes to call us, the Church of the Larger Fellowships podcast and YouTube show where we center love, light, and liberation and warmth and Black Lives Matter and so much. We have an eclectic, fun show today. Some topics not so fun, and some topics will, be hopefully thought-provoking. I'm Aisha Hauser. That's who I am, in Seattle, Washington. And yesterday it was super hot. Today it's a little cooler. I actually had to turn the AC on, and AC is not even a huge thing here in Seattle, but I'm grateful that I have it because it was hot. And I'm going to turn this over to Michael Tino. Reverend Michael Tino, how are you and where are you?
Good morning, good afternoon. This is Michael Tino joining you from Peekskill, New York, here in the lovely Hudson Valley, north of New York City. It is a rainy, gray spring day, and I am glad for it. We need the rain. My garden needs the rain. My tomato plants need the rain. It's good. So I'm okay with gray and rainy, as long as it's sunny this weekend when the town pool is open, because we haven't been to the pool since 2019, and we've got reservations. You have to make reservations to go to the pool now. They only let 26 adults and 50 children into the entire pool complex, and it's a very, very large city pool. So we're looking forward to that. Hopefully there'll be weather for it this weekend. Don Fortune, how are you?
I've got the same weather that you have, which is I have a different opinion about it. I'm just sort of it's it's gray, it's rainy. The part I don't like really is the fact that it's so muggy. It's so muggy. Like going outside, it's like trying to breathe water. It's just thick out there. And after, X number of weeks of trees attempting to wage war on my sinuses with the pollen this year has just been brutal. But you know what? I have yet to shovel humidity. So having grown up in Maine, everything is measured against, do I have to shovel it or will I fall on it? And neither of those things has happened with humidity. So, but things here are pretty good. It's warm. It's, the gardening people are happy, and I'm spending the day indoors where I can breathe. So that's cool. Tanner, how are you? The wizard behind the curtain back there.
Hey, Don, thank you. I'm doing well. I'm in Sacramento, California. Actually, for our super fan viewers who have watched the arc of the VUU, when we first started this season, I was in Southern California enjoying the perfect weather. And now it was 106 degrees just 2 days ago. And today it'll be in the high 90s, which is considered cool, apparently. So struggling and adapting to that. And I think my AC is working overtime, just absolutely hanging on by a thread, probably. It's a really old unit, but we're just all crossing our fingers that nothing happens and it stays good. So yes, that's where I am and what my weather looks like. I will be taking your comments from YouTube and putting them over for our hosts here. So please comment any questions you have, any comments, and I will make sure that the hosts see them. If you have any technical issues, please feel free to drop that in the chat as well. And I will pass it back to Aisha.
And one of the things we're going to invite our viewers live today is to simply ask us questions. If there's something you always wanted to know about any of us who are on today. Stitcheroo said, missed y'all. We missed you too last week. So please, Darby, we are not on summer break yet. Darby Lockridge, also a super fan, along with Stitcheroo. No, we have a couple more shows and then we will be on summer break. So if you all have any burning questions and appropriate We may or may not answer them, but hopefully we will answer them. And Tanner, I have a clarifying question because I've never lived in California. My understanding is you went from more south to north. So how did it get hotter? Is what's going on in California? Like, shouldn't it be hotter as you go south? I'm thoroughly confused, and it's important to me to get this answered, and then we'll move on to important topics.
That's actually a really good question. So I simplify it a lot when I say I went south to north. Really, the biggest is I went from coast to inland. So I grew up right on the water. My parents' house is in the Channel Islands Harbor area. And so we're right on the water. So you get so all of that is when you're near the water, it's very temperate. And, and then when I went north, I went inland to Sacramento, which is a few hours from the coast. And you get much hotter temperatures than you would get in San Francisco, the Bay Area. That's the
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that because truly I have no clue about California except for LA and San Francisco and the Redwoods are somewhere. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Anyone else have follow-up questions on the weather in California? Because if not, I would love to start with UU Roundup. And one of the things that happened recently is a candidates debate forum. Michael, Dawn, Tanner, help me out.
I think they called it a forum.
A forum, thank you. And it was Reverend Sam Trimble and Jay Kissel.
Yeah, Sam Trumbore and Jay Kiskell.
I'm going to hand this over to you.
That's all right. So the two people running for the contested board spot are the Reverend Sam Trumbore, who was nominated by the UUA nominating committee and went through that vetting process of the UUA nominating committee. Sam is the minister of our congregation in Albany, New York. So I know Sam. And he's been the minister in Albany for quite a while, almost 20 years now. So he has a long-term, stable, healthy ministry there. And he is being opposed by a petition candidate named Jay Kiskell, who is representing an organization that calls themselves the Fifth Principle Project, which is, I think, a fairly blatant attempt to steal the name of the Fifth Principle Commission and their reputation. It's a group of people aligned with folks who oppose anti-racism work in our association and oppose any attempts at dismantling white supremacy culture in our association, and who fail to recognize that systemic and institutional racism are actually things. So Sam, who is a leader in justice work, who was one of the leaders of the Open UUA project a couple years back that helped us have more transparency in UUA stuff, who has been a leader of the UU Buddhist network, and so is a deeply spiritual person, and who has started a New York legislative ministry for Unitarian Universalists, is being opposed by this person, Jay. And I have to admit, I didn't watch the forum. I didn't watch the forum because I know Sam and I trust the nominating committee, and I know the agenda of the people who are backing Jay, and I don't need a forum to tell me who I'm supporting in this election. I've endorsed Sam pretty clearly, but from what I understand, it's a difficult medium, a web forum for communicating relational things, like Sam's deep understanding of the need to center the voices of the marginalized in our association, which I think he expressed really beautifully in in the forum. It's just there are lots of complicated things that don't lend themselves to sound bites. So I don't know that it was a particularly useful event, but it happened. It happened.
I'd love to read,
My-
I just pulled up Sam's quote about who was at the center, if I may, real quick, Dawn, and then I'll send it over to you. So this is from Reverend Sam Trumbore. Who is at the center was the question. And the answer is, his answer is, quote, I'm extremely sensitive to the voices at the margins who have shared our values. Then they come into our congregations and encounter our culture, which is a barrier and is exclusive. We've been trying to move into a wider sense of inclusion. Jay talks about being an institutionalist. It's the institution that's the barrier, standing in front of the welcome. When you challenge an institution, people get scared and resistant. The bridge is shared values, but we have to address the institutional barriers that aren't allowing us to be the welcoming community we can be. Well, amen to that, Sam. Go ahead, Dawn.
My contribution was merely that while my Facebook feed was really entertaining for a short while. Also, I heard amazing things about, because I did not watch it either. I have been on medical leave from my congregation because of, stress and depression and anxiety and pandemic and 4 years of, wannabe fascism, all that stuff. Anyway, so that was just one of those things I was like, you know what? This is not going to add to my mental health to watch this. So I was not able, chose not to watch it. However, I do want to give a shout out to Casey Slack, who I understand moderated the thing with grace and dignity and something that didn't actually require, a striped shirt and a whistle. So shout out to Casey for doing that good work. That's for sure.
Thank you for that. Yes, shout out to Casey Slack. I feel the need to name that the group that you had named, Michael, who is co-opting what seems to be a benign a name for themselves are not benign. I mean, there are a group of people in Unitarian Universalism that genuinely want to resist any kind of transformation that will transform Unitarian Universalism to be more centered in liberation or be a liberatory faith. That's the resistance. I mean, to argue about the words white supremacy or critical race theory. I said to someone this week who, it was like critical race theory. I said, literally, if you boil down like maple syrup, what critical race theory is, it names that race has been used as a tool of oppression. Race is a social construct that has been used as a tool of oppression. And then critical race theory goes into the nuances of how. So to deny critical race theory, which I invite our viewers to look at who else in our wider US culture is also fighting critical race theory. And that's happening in Unitarian Universalism too. And so I don't feel the need to protect people or beat around the bush. It feels important to name that the group that is resisting and saying that their freedom of speech is under attack, it's gaslighting, it's cruel. Because for people with privilege to name this, and it's also replicating a lot of what is happening from the right in the national dialogue. So
yeah, and a sneak preview for all the viewers out there. Next week we have Elias Ortega, president of Meadville Lombard Theological School, and an expert in critical race theory, who is coming on to talk specifically about what that is and why the reactionary right wing has latched onto it as something to attack. So that's next week's show. So I don't want to get too far in the weeds. Darby Lockridge writes in our comments, I watched some of the forum and was overwhelmed by the feeling of gaslighting. From hopefully you meant from Jay's messaging, because I think the parts that I've seen and heard and read transcripts of, it's true. And for someone to say, for example, as Jay did in the forum, that the Commission on Institutional Change report does not meet an academic standard, is A, bullshit, and, and B, irrelevant. They interviewed 1,100 people to make that report. It's like that's like 1% of Unitarian Universalists out there got interviewed to make that report. And meanwhile, Jay himself is the co-author of a book called Used to be UU. So like someone who used to be UU is running for the board. That is rife with errors and failed miserably to interview anyone who disagreed with the contentions of the book. Now, you will see in the Commission on Institutional Change's report, even in like highlighted boxes, people who disagree, because they thought those voices needed to be represented in there too. Stitch writes, I left my brick and mortar congregation because their misunderstanding of free speech doctrine, racism, and fragility, it became too toxic to bear. Yeah, I think, people who use free speech to mean that harmful speech should have no consequences in voluntary associations are full of crap.
Free speech, the argument, and as somebody who spent a number of years as a journalist, free speech is near and dear to my heart. However, you cannot shout fire in a crowded theater. You cannot use language that would incite or provoke a reasonable person to violence. And you cannot use language, or you can. Well, see, here's the thing. You can do all of those things, but there will be consequences. And the people who are shouting about free speech really just want speech that is free from accountability, right? They don't want to be held accountable for the hurtful things that they're saying. So I just, sure, you can say what you like, but understand that there are rules and laws about hurting people. And oh geez, I'm gonna say this, and I don't remember where I said. It's gonna be one of those, like, I saw it on Facebook, so whatever. A mom was having a conversation with her kid in the car, and a song came on, and she's like, "Oh, just to warn you, this has got some bad language in it. It uses the F word." And after a while into the song, the kid was like, so fuck was the F word? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, oh. And the mother was like, so what's the deal? And the kid said, well, that doesn't hurt anybody. I thought the word that would be wrong would be the word fag, because that hurts people. And that's how the kid defined hurtful language. That's how the kid defined language that ought to be prohibited, is that language that is intentionally violent towards people who are disempowered. And I thought that is not a bad measure for any language. Profanity is one thing. Willful violence against the powerless is something very different.
Amen. And Jessica Starrockers has a couple comments I want to lift up. One, just to your point, gaslighting often uses arguments against others that obviously apply to themselves. Amen to that. But I want to turn to earlier, Dawn, Jessica says, Dawn, thank you for modeling mental health self-care as critical healthcare. I want to move to what's happening internationally with Naomi Osaka, who decided to pull from, she removed herself from the French Open because she didn't want to face the press, because the press can be heinous, not always, but it's certainly sports press. And that was met with, she got support. She didn't get enough support from the tennis community, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Serena Williams certainly supported her, and a couple of other people, but Martina did.
Yeah. Martina
Okay.
came out immediately.
Excellent.
And said, "Good for you."
Good. Because, and then there's the other folks who are like, well, this is how it is, and this is part of the whole thing. And I'm like, but this is part of the violence you were talking about, of how we treat humans, right? This is already a high stakes, high pressure, just playing the game. So why does there need to be then this performative, and then if the person loses, you have to explain why you lost, which is just seems cruel and absurd. What were you thinking? What was the other person thinking? I mean, and it happens in all the sports, right? And it's part of, to me, the violent extractive capitalism that is pro sports. And even, look at what's happening with college. None of the none of them get paid, but yet colleges are making millions and millions of dollars. So there's an element of violent extractive capitalism within sports, professional and amateur, that we don't talk enough about, and the mental health costs, and in addition to the physical costs. So I wanted to lift that up and talk about it.
Not also, the last time she was at the French Open, she beat Serena because some are saying it was because, in part, the referee cost Serena a game, penalized her a game in the set. And so when, oh God, brain cramp, forgot her name. What's her name?
Osaka?
Naomi
Osaka. Yeah, when Naomi Osaka won, the crowd booed her because they felt it was an illegitimate win because Serena had been dinged. I mean, I'm nothing of a conformist, but I have to say that in the sports culture of Japan and some of the Eastern countries, they cheer the people they are in favor of, and they do not behave like asses towards their opponents. The job is to cheer for your guy or person, and not cheer when not revel in someone else's defeat, and there's that bit of cruelty that is part of the culture in which we live. There's that bit of true meanness where we want to see somebody suffer. We want to see somebody humiliated. We want to rub their nose in it for some reason. And that all wraps up with insecurity. And, people who are secure don't need to treat others that way. And so
and good for Naomi for opting out and taking care of herself.
Yes.
Yes. We need
for her.
Take care of ourselves. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and back to Jessica's point, good for her for modeling that mental health is health. Right. And that she withdrew for mental health reasons as surely as she would if she had sprained her ankle.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody would be faulting her if she had sprained her ankle and withdrew. Right. Mental health is health, and we need to take care of our brains and our emotions and our well-being in that way. As surely as we take care of ourselves when we have a virus or an infection, right? So
yeah.
Darby Lockridge has actually asked us a question about CLF, Aisha Hauser. Darby says, in the services coffee hour, we are getting lots of feedback about the warmth and community feeling about the services since the ministerial change, and that our efforts are very much noticed and appreciated. I think that part of that is the feeling that happens when you actually have a team that is working together and likes one another, but it's certainly on purpose. I think we have the ability to use this momentum, Darby writes, to continue building our community building in our congregation, and would love to hear if you have thoughts, opinions, plans in this area. Yes, I agree. So, Aisha, you can respond too as another third of our lead ministry team. But one of the things that we will probably be putting out sometime this summer, depending on how the schedule of GA and some vacation time and stuff happens, is an application or an invitation to apply to lead a group. We CLF has never had a history of allowing lay leadership to have community building ideas and do it. And the part of that is just the DNA of CLF, right? We were founded as church by mail. So we provide services, we send it to you, you open it, you do it. And it was that kind of relationship for many, many years. Well, the internet makes different things possible. And so we've noticed a lot of people saying, oh, I would love to have a discussion group about such and such a book. And there's no reason why staff people and ministers need to run a discussion group. If you want to have a discussion group about such and such a book, we should give you the space to have that. And so we're actually looking forward to that. We will want programs and gatherings that lay people in CLF propose to further the mission of our congregation and to adhere to our philosophy of liberation and anti-racism in a certain way, but if they can, to center the voices of the marginalized. But it won't be an onerous application process. We really want to be as permission giving as we can, I think, given the constraints of being a 3,000 person congregation that stretches all over the world. So
Yeah.
Darby, I would look forward to that. We really think community building is important.
And we're also, along with applications, and it's also about accountability too. We want to be responsible to the ministry of the congregation. So along with, hey, I want to talk about this book, this movie, this whatever excites you, there's also going to be an invitation for folks who want to lead covenant circles. We have about 200 people on a wait list for covenant circles, and we simply do not have the staff to be able to lead groups for everyone. So we're also working on this over the summer. We will be asking folks who want to be a covenant circle leader to also apply, and it also won't be onerous, but we do want to make sure you're a CLF member. And then there will be a training workshop, orientation to what it means to be, what are the responsibilities, what are the expectations. The intention is not that it's going to be onerous. It'll probably model a little bit after what happens at brick and mortar, but however, on the internet and through Zoom. And so that's another exciting thing that we're doing. And I also found I've been doing Tanner, who's behind the chalice. Lyndon and I, a few weeks ago, did a deepening Unitarian Universalism class over a few weeks, and people loved it. And then it was iterative because someone started talking about forgiveness. And I said, I really don't ask for forgiveness anymore. I don't give it. I talk more about repair. Because I think forgiveness is very personal. So just from that comment came a seminar, which I led yesterday with Tanner. And it was a rich conversation. We had about 25 people show up, and a few people talked about it on social media. So there'll be those opportunities as well, like when there are topics and things that can deepen who we are as a faith and create a container we are in a position to offer as many containers for grappling with what it means to be Unitarian Universalism in real time. And I need to say, it truly is different, the experience of what it means to sit in discomfort when you have been part of the dominant culture, if that's your identity, and if you haven't. So those are different. We named that yesterday. So there are opportunities, Darby, and we're working on it. And if you have ideas, let us know. And we thank you for Darby's one of our not only super fans, but also one of our beloved volunteers who helps the CLF every week. So thank you. Oh, yes, of course, Dawn. Of course, we should mention Pride. There's rainbows everywhere. And somebody tweeted that that the LGBT community stole the rainbow from God. And then someone replied, like, that's awesome that we stole the rainbow from God.
Oh, man. You know, a year ago, we were first into the pandemic and trying to figure out which way was up. And I remember, like, the big question that I asked at that time is, what is Pride without a parade? You know, what is Pride without a party? And where I went with it is, without a parade, Pride was a riot. And don't forget that. It started as a resistance movement to police violence and oppression. And in these times when we can't gather in person, it's tricky. Like, how do we, I mean, this is such a deeper topic. Like, how do we maintain this piece of our identity if we are not able to perform it? You know, I read a collection of stories one time about femme identity and femme politics and femme liberation in the queer community. And there was a particular essay by a woman whose name I cannot remember now, but she had a bunch of medical sensitivities. She couldn't wear makeup and couldn't wear hair care product and couldn't do all kinds of things. And so she struggled with how to be femme without makeup and without heels and without hair products and without all of the stuff that is performative about her identity. And it was a rehash of an original article she'd written years before. But I'm always sort of thinking of that for those of us who, for whatever reason, can't access public spaces for our identity. How do we maintain that in a healthy way that isn't, you know, Grindr or Grizzly or whatever, that is our identity? Like, how do you, we are relational creatures, and we define ourselves in part by how we relate to others. So how do we define ourselves in this time now, over a year since we've been able to march together or to have a parade or to have a festival? So I went online the other day just to see if there were any Pride celebrations happening this year. And it looks like New York City is planning to be all virtual. San Francisco, I think, is going to be virtual. Oakland has their Pride celebration on Labor Day weekend. So that's a possibility, I imagine. But it's you know, yay, I guess that modern capitalism has finally embraced the idea that that gay people might have money to spend, and Target looks like you know, the Castro on a sunny June afternoon with rainbows in every direction. But in this time of isolation, celebrating a particular community is challenging. So, as the other resident queer person, I was going to ask Michael to save me from this.
You know, as far as I understand, there actually will be a Pride March in New York City this year on the 27th, and
but I saw that it was going to be virtual.
Is it a virtual Pride March?
That's what I looked on the website. I thought, Because, like, I would drive up to
Oh.
New York for that, maybe.
It says including the broadcast special, virtual experience. I guess there's a virtual experience. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there was a big controversy in New York that for the first time, the organizers of New York City Pride have asked law enforcement officers, actually mandated
Yes.
that law enforcement officers may not participate in Pride events in uniform.
Yes.
And as a recognition of the fact that law enforcement officers in uniform have done great harm in our country to queer people, to black and brown people, and to others. And it's been a huge controversy in New York City, and as you might imagine, because it's the LGBT law enforcement officers that are like, but we're queer and blah blah blah, not realizing that
You're still a
the
member of the oppressive
Stonewall
class.
Inn is in New York City, and so the Stonewall riots were in New York City. The Stonewall uprising was in New York City, and the Stonewall uprising happened when people, largely trans people, drag queens, and people of color, pushed back against police violence against them and said no more. And that was the Stonewall uprising and how it started. And so, and a lot of people point to Stonewall as the birthplace of the modern Pride movement. It was an event in LGBT history. Yeah, we did a service about Marsha P. Johnson, for example, who was one of the people at that uprising. And the police were the aggressors. They were perpetrating violence against the queer community then, and they still are. So I'm actually proud of New York City Pride for finally saying, and New York City Pride, bless their hearts, is as like commercialized and like icky and capitalist nonsense as they come. When I was last at New York City Pride, it was the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, and the Unitarian Universalist contingent was lined up on the streets next to the rainbow-colored Mercedes SUVs, and I was just like, I can't do this. I cannot march with rainbow-colored Mercedes SUVs sponsoring Pride. It was so horrible. So like maybe they're going in a different direction.
When I lived in St. Louis a couple of years ago, the two major corporate sponsors of Pride there, now St. Louis, Missouri, was Bud Light and Monsanto. Because those were the two corporate overlords of St. Louis, Missouri. Monsanto's been bought out and renamed and is trying very hard to get away from that image, but that's how those two corporate entities try to buy back or try to purchase some sort of legitimacy as benevolent organizations. They fund a bunch of art projects too. But the police thing, I want to say last year or the year before, in St. Louis, the trans, I don't know if it was Visibility or Trans Day of Remembrance, but there was a march. No, I think it was Pride. And the MTUG, which is the Metropolitan Trans something group, was going to be the marshals. And they had, as a requirement, they said, we will do this, but no uniformed officers in the parade. None. Because for the trans community, particularly in fairly conservative for all the blue it votes, St. Louis, the trans community is targeted brutally by the police there. And the organizer said yes, and then at the last minute, without notifying MTUG, they allowed the police with uniforms in, and it was just a real shit show. And yeah,
if I may, I saw a response. So yes to kind of the ickiness of because the thing is with this capitalist opportunist putting flags on everything is it doesn't translate into lobbying against these oppressive laws that are being passed. And that's where the immense disconnect, I mean, among others, but that's the big one. But I saw someone reflected maybe in a tweet or something that, who said, yeah, this may be off-putting, all of this capitalist throwing a flag on, a rainbow flag Mercedes. However, as a kid, he said, I would have loved to have seen this many rainbows, like as a gay kid. And I don't have that experience, but there was something about that was kind of like, it's the mixed bag of capitalism. It's like, yeah, this is off-putting on one hand, and on the other hand, it is sending the message that there is value in affirming the gay community, and it's at this point money value, but I would love to see it translate to lobbyists saying, stop with these bullshit, oppressive, cruel laws that are being passed. And the other thing is back to, there was I had posted that Calm, the app Calm, I guess it's a meditation app, had supported Naomi Osaka and said that if anybody else wants to opt out of the press conference, they would pay the fines, which is so gross to me that athletes get fined by not going to press conferences. And then there was a comment by someone who said, well, this is just a company taking advantage of capital, make a name for themselves. But I kind of thought back to that tweet of the person who said, I would have felt affirmed as a kid with all these rainbows. And I'm like, but it's better that they do this than not. It's still better to me that within the shitty system we're in, that there's some okay, but Calm is saying mental health is health. Mental health is health. That was what they put. So I feel mixed about it because I'm thoroughly against violent extractive capitalism. And I'm like, well, I'm glad that Calm did this. It's better than not doing it. So I feel super mixed by it. I mean, not super mixed, but I feel like it's a mixed bag.
I'm totally okay with rainbow, anything you want. People should not have the opportunity to go shopping without seeing rainbows this month, right? Like you should be able to get your trans pride clothing at Target for cheap, and not I'm good with that. And it's yes, the visibility is important, and there's a certain part of me that says, but stay out of my parade. And part of that goes back to where the origins of that came from, that we started marching in the streets to be transgressive. And there's nothing transgressive about Mercedes SUVs.
The thing that brought this up was, I don't know, at some point I decided to try to organize my office space, which if you look behind me is sort of indicative of what the rest of the room looks like. And I came across this little plastic tub, because everything in my life is in these little plastic tubs, these little takeout containers full of random shit. And I saw pride rings. Remember pride rings? Right? These things.
Oh yeah, freedom
right?
rings.
Right? Yeah.
I've still got mine somewhere.
So I started digging. And I know Quinn has a set. My little dog has a set just long enough for her. And then these things. And I'm just like, man, some of us have been at this a while. And every one of these has some sort of story with it, and progress happens in leapfrogs. We leapfrog progress always. Those of us who are on the leading edge today are going to be obsolete in a couple of weeks. And that's how social justice and progress moves, you know, and visibility matters. And I just want to also offer a shout out for all of those people out there who might find themselves somewhere in the alphabet soup of identities being shared, being celebrated and recognized and affirmed this month. And if you're not in a place where it's safe to proclaim that and claim that on your own, I want you to know that you're still legitimate and that you're still blessed and that you're still worth love and that you still deserve to be treated kindly and with grace. Because for all of us who are out and making people uncomfortable, there are others who can't do so for a myriad of reasons, whether that's personal safety or professional risk or whatever else. And so for those of us who are out, it is also worth a reminder to not get snide or snarky towards those who are not able to be out. We need all of us in this effort, and not everybody can participate in the same way.
Amen.
Amen. Stitch Aru writes in the chat that they applied to be a prison pen pal after the last VUU, which is so very exciting. And if you didn't watch that show, I encourage you to go back. All of our previous shows are on YouTube. We're going to get them out on the podcast, hopefully over the summer. We'll have a little time to catch up with the podcast, but they're all on the VUU on YouTube. Go back and watch that because we still have a waiting list of incarcerated members of CLF who are waiting for pen pals. And we've done a really good job. Jen Johnson, especially our outgoing learning fellow in prison ministry, has done a marvelous job of reducing that waiting list. But to my mind, there should be a waiting list of free world pen pals waiting for incarcerated members to come and ask for pen pals. Those are the people who should be waiting, the people on the outside of the bars. And so if you are so inclined, we need you to just write letters back and forth to incarcerated Unitarian Universalist members of CLF, and make a connection. Like, take that risk to make that connection, because I've received a number of letters since I started as part of the lead ministry team from our incarcerated members in response to things I've written for Quest, mostly, and they've been really lovely and heartfelt. And these folks who are incarcerated, who are dehumanized every day by our prison industrial system, need that human connection of church, and we can offer that.
And they've sought out our denomination. I mean, and many of these folks found Unitarian Universalism while incarcerated from other incarcerated UUs. And so I love that, Michael. It should be the free world people that are on waiting lists, not the folks who don't have resources and access to community in the way that we do.
And, as we speak about pride, many of our members are queer folks in prison who are dehumanized by prison just by being incarcerated, but are sort of doubly attacked for their identity, their gender identity, and their sexual identity in prisons. Many of them are Black and brown trans folks who are incarcerated, and for whom no other religious group operating in the prisons is offering them a life-saving message, and we are. Right. So thank you, Stitch. We're really excited that you're going to be a pen pal. I hope that your pen pal relationship is fruitful and mutually beneficial. And anybody else out there, we still need more.
Yeah, and if you're part of a brick and mortar, encourage the folks in your congregation to sign up if you have access to other folks to do this. That would be excellent.
we would be happy to partner with your brick and mortar congregations in this and send materials and educational stuff too. So
Yes. I forgot what else was on our list to talk about. What else is going on in the world? Oh, the end of the pandemic, end of the pandemic. It's been interesting to go out and socialize again. And I mean, it's been great. And there's still places in Seattle, the Seattle area, mostly I went to a museum for the first time in over a year and a half. The Museum of Pop Culture, which is right next to this, is in the Seattle Center next to the Space Needle. And they still mandate masks within the museum and they limit the amount of people inside. But other than that, it felt like there was no longer a pandemic. There were people everywhere. And while I loved it and I'm vaccinated, I also, it's still a little bit like, oh, okay. We're doing this. And I'm just praying, Michael, you're the scientist on the show. I'd love to get reassurance that we're not going to go in like some, I feel a little bit insecure. Like, should I get excited that now the world's opening up, or is this all going to get shut down tomorrow and something? I don't know. But I guess anything could happen. I should not ask for guarantees in life.
As I read the science, the vaccines that are approved for use in the United States are fairly robust and so far provide a good immune response against the variants that are popping up, but that could change. There could be a variant that comes up that these vaccines don't protect against. So far, the vaccines that are approved for use in the United States have a really good track record with respect to preventing the spread of disease, even in people with asymptomatic infections. Now, and yes, everybody's going to go, well, the Yankees, well, if you're going to like shower together, like all bets are off, right?
Wait, I don't know what happened with the Yankees.
But, like there were like 7 people on the Yankees who had asymptomatic COVID infections, even though they'd all received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and they were like all but one were completely asymptomatic, but they all get tested like twice a week. So the only way they knew they were infected is they got tested and it came back positive. But there's some really good evidence emerging that even in those asymptomatic infections, the risk of transmission is greatly reduced by the vaccine. I think there's cause for optimism and there's not cause for ridiculousness, right? Nobody under 12 is vaccinated yet. People who are immune suppressed cannot be vaccinated or do not form antibodies when they're vaccinated. That includes any of your beloved who've received organ transplants or who have immune compromising diseases.
Cancer survivors.
That's right. They can't get vaccinated, or the vaccines are far, far less effective or not effective at all in many of those ways. So, don't go nuts. I don't think we're going to see a fourth surge unless there is a variant that emerges that the vaccines don't protect against at all. But just because there's not a fourth surge doesn't mean that everybody who's immune compromised should be sacrificed so that we can feel normal, right? Like, we talk about prioritizing those who are most vulnerable. We need to do that. We need to prioritize those who are most vulnerable and not act like just because I'm vaccinated and I have a good immune response, that like I can do whatever the F I want.
Also, if you can get vaccinated, get your ass vaccinated, because I'm sorry, but the left has a whole faction of unvaccinated anti-vaxxers, just like the right does. Get your ass vaccinated. If you're not part of the group that absolutely is prohibited from being vaccinated, get vaccinated. Because right now, anybody over 12 is eligible. And at least in Washington state, you only have to sign up and you'll get an appointment probably within the day.
And it's free.
You don't even need an appointment in New York anymore. You can just show up Like you don't even need an appointment. You just show up and they'll stick a needle in your arm. The minute things are approved for 8-year-olds, I'll be taking my daughter to get vaccinated. But even though my husband and I have both been fully vaccinated, we mask in public places because we have an 8-year-old child who is not vaccinated. And like her health is our most important concern.
Right. Who was also the little germ vector in your house too.
Yeah, well, there is that.
But the 8-year-olds do that by nature.
There's that. Yes, our daughter is also a COVID survivor, so she actually has her own antibodies. But she brought it home, and I didn't get it because I'd been vaccinated. Like, and it's not like I didn't snuggle with the 7-year-old, right? Like it's
yeah.
This childless person holds the somewhat jaundiced view that all children are little germ factories. At some level,
freaking petri dishes. Yes,
they. Yeah, and our religious educators looking at the two of us like we are malcontents.
No, my son is a toddler. He was 2 in New Jersey. Gave everyone one Christmas norovirus, and he just threw up once. So I just thought it was an upset stomach. Took him to a family event. The next day we all were a mess, and I'm like, oh, I think that was sorry, my bad. And that was on me. I should have just stayed home, but it didn't even. Now I understand how germs work more, and clearly I would make different decisions. But literally, there was about 12 of us. Not one person was spared, and I realized it was him. So I'm like, none of us had been. So no, I'm because that's what they do, and you kind of just live with it. But yes, they are. I'm not. The thing is, I do want to say about that, and then we're getting close to the top of the hour. With congregations starting to think about opening up in the fall, what I hope does not happen is a pathologizing of children. Like we already, our brick and mortar congregations already aren't the most child-friendly places, depending on where you are. That has been my experience. And so what I don't want to see, what I hope does not happen is that folks find more of an excuse to separate children from the adult population. So children are people, and let's not forget that and they are part of our congregations, part of our ministry, and we love them as much as we love I had a minister once say they were child phobic, and I'm like, you would never say that about another group of people. Like it just wasn't okay. And so I want to just name that our children are also part of who we are as a faith. And let's not use them as an excuse to keep separate adults and children.
And we are called to protect them.
Thank you.
Because they are now the vulnerable ones.
Right.
Children are not the future of the church. Children are the church.
Are the church, period, full stop. Thank you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if that means that vaccinated people need to wear masks for another couple months,
do it.
Suck it up and do it.
Really?
You could do it.
Put on your adult panties and go and your mask.
And Tanner's trying to rein us in.
I know.
God bless
I love
Tanner.
You all. Thank you, everybody.
The responsible one.
I know.
And again, next week we are really looking forward to a deep dive into critical race theory with Elias Ortega. Who is going to tell us what it is, and not just the soundbite of what it is, but like the 50-year history of it, and why it has become a target for the right and the right wing in our faith and outside of our faith.
Because they think we liberals just sort of like sit in a room and dream up interesting ways to piss them off.
That's right. And Tanner reminds me 2 weeks from today, for our last show before we actually do take a summer break, we are going to have the Article 2 Study Commission on the show. The people who are working on proposing revisions to our principles and sources. So they're going to be on the show.
Yes.
I'm excited to shows. Well, thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you.
See you next week.
Have a great week.